On November 22nd of the year 2000, weeks after the presidential election that year, we still did not know who had won Florida and who had therefore won the presidency. Over 10,000 ballots remained to be counted by the Miami-Dade Elections Board. When Republican operatives, who the Bush campaign had flown in from around the country, heard that that count in Miami was going to go forward, the count of those 10,000 plus remaining ballots, those GOP operatives decided they would physically shut down that count. The two direct organizers of the mob that turned up at the Miami elections office were New York State Republican Party chairman at the time, Brendan Quinn, and New York Republican Congressman John Sweeney, who's now better known for losing his seat in Congress after multiple DUI arrests and domestic violence allegations from his wife, and an odd proclivity for showing up at frat parties and having his picture taken there, too. The mob that the GOP sent to stop that count in Miami was billed at the time as a spontaneous grassroots uprising, one that just happened to be made up of no one at all from Miami, all Republican national operatives, including at least a half dozen who, according to IRS records, received payment for their services from the Bush-Cheney recount committee. Here were the Brooks Brothers rioters, just a bunch of ordinary Americans who wanted to see justice done, who were moved to spontaneous protest. Rioter 1 here, Tom Pyle, an aide to Republican Congressman Tom DeLay. Rioter 2, Gary Melfres, former staff director of the House Judiciary Subcommittee on Criminal Justice. Rioter 3, Rory Cooper, staff member with the National Republican Congressional Committee. Rioter 4, Kevin Smith, former House Republican conference analyst. Rioter 5, Stephen Brophy, former aide to Senator Fred Thompson. Rioter 6, Matt Schlapp, Bush campaign staffer. Rioter 7, Roger Morse, aide to Republican Congressman Van Hillary. Rioter 8, Dwayne Gibson, aide to Republican Congressman Don Young. Rioter 9, Chuck Royal, aide to then Republican Congressman Jim DeMint. And Rioter 10, Lena McConkey, former assistant to Republican Jim Ross Lightfoot. Many of the Brooks Brothers rioters went on to pretty good jobs in the Bush-Cheney administration. That mob scene they participated in became something that Republicans put on their resumes when applying for the right kind of Republican Party job or the right kind of conservative movement job. Well, now, the teabag healthcare riots that we're seeing, the shout 'em down, shut 'em down thuggery being staged right now at town hall meetings about healthcare, is again a source of conservative pride as corporate lobbying groups brag about their ability to turn out the mobs to shut down the democratic process. Because, of course, the single most important piece of the history of the Brooks Brothers riot is that it worked. Joining us now is Chris Hayes, Washington editor of The Nation magazine. Chris, thanks very much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, as always, Rachel.
In trying to make sense of the healthcare town meeting mob scenes that we're seeing organized now and the strategy here, do you think this is the same kind of strategy that was behind the Brooks Brothers riot in Florida?
I think it is very similar. I mean, I think the key phrase is something that was uttered by Congressman Sweeney and actually reported by a conservative editorialist of the Wall Street Journal back in 2000, which was that when he heard about what was going on with the recount, he issued the order to, quote, shut it down. I think shut it down kind of epitomizes exactly what the strategy is. I mean, it's hard for me to even talk on the television while they're screaming, shut it down. And I can imagine that it's difficult to sort of conduct any kind of public discourse, any kind of small d democratic politics in the face of this sort of implacable bullying, braying, and intimidation. And shut it down, I think, is really the kind of catchphrase for everything that we're going to be seeing through the August recess in these town halls.
Right. It's not about making one side of the argument in an argument, it's making sure there can be no argument. Right. Chris, one of the great regrets of Democrats that I have heard over the past decade is that they weren't called by their party to go fight in Florida the way that Republicans called their people to go fight in Florida. Looking back on Florida 9 years down the road, now that we know what happened there, can you imagine how things might have worked out if Democrats had done the same thing that Republicans did? I mean, is it conceivable that they might have asked Democrats to go there?
Well, I mean, to consider the counterfactual, I think it's undeniable the Democrats got out-hustled and they got out-organized. And I want to say, at a certain level, right, what the right is doing right now, it's corporate-sponsored and it's AstroTurf, but it's organizing. They are coordinating. There's a set of very powerful interests that are spending literally millions of dollars a day to defeat this agenda, and they are coordinating it. And the answer in a free democratic republic like our own is to meet organizing with more organizing, to not get out-hustled, to make sure that people who have been, are going bankrupt from the health health insurers are showing up at these meetings in blue dog districts, etc. So I think there's a really crucial lesson from Florida, which is that you can't get out hustled. You need to organize. And this is, look, democracy is about the nonviolent resolution of political conflict, and there is political conflict here, and Democrats have to organize their own forces.
The other approach to it, the other strategic lesson that could be taken here is that I think the lesson that the Obama folks took from this past year's presidential campaign, where they didn't try to organize people to go to McCain-Palin rallies to shout down the kill 'em all rhetoric that they were hearing from their crowds. They publicized it, essentially, that they used those as displays of extremism to try to splinter the people who were on the right, who were either tolerating that stuff or denouncing it. Is it possible that the Obama folks will take that same approach to this display of extremism at these town halls?
I think that's exactly what you're already seeing. I mean, this is sort of signature Obama political strategy, which is a kind of judo, right? To kind of use the excesses of your enemy against them. And I think that you're already seeing the DNC and other people sending the message out, showing the signs of swastikas that are showing up at these rallies, the images of Stalin, the screaming, the sort of red-faced, spittle-flecked anger that's coming out in these town halls, to show that, look, this isn't just, some kind of middle-of-the-road, undecided independent voter who's having some reservations about the possible cost of a health care bill. These are radicals. These are extremists. These are zealots. And as someone who has palled around with radicals, zealots, and extremists, there's nothing wrong with that. They should just be called out for what they are.
Chris Hayes, Washington editor for The Nation magazine and an appealing sort of zealot. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks, Chris.